This episode is brought to you by my very first book, The Fifth Vital Sign: Master Your Cycles and Optimize Your Fertility. With over 1,000 research citations, it is the most comprehensive resource on fertility awareness and the menstrual cycle to date. The Fifth Vital Sign is available for purchase on Amazon in ebook and paperback formats. Audio is coming. And you can grab the first chapter for free over at fertilityfriday.com/vitalsign. That's fertilityfriday.com/vitalsign. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 245. Welcome to the 245th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm excited to share today's episode with you. In today's episode, I'm talking about a topic that I haven't really addressed on the podcast at all, but I have had a lot of requests for. So today we'll be talking about essential oils and how they can be used to improve and support hormone health. Now, as you know, I've recently released my very first book, The Fifth Vital Sign: Master Your Cycles and Optimize Your Fertility, and the response has just been incredible. I actually wanted to share with you one of the reviews that one of my readers left on Amazon.com. So this is a review from E. Olson. She writes, "So important. I love how no-nonsense Lisa is about this vital information while also backing it up with science. This information is so important, and Lisa has really found a way to make it accessible to everyone. I found Lisa through her podcast over 2 years ago, and having this book is the perfect way to put all of this great information into print form. I will be recommending it to everybody." Thank you so much, E. Olson. The Fifth Vital Sign is available for purchase in both ebook and paperback formats over on Amazon. And don't forget that you can grab the first copy of The Fifth Vital Sign for free over at fertilityfriday.com/vitalsign. Now, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. And today, I'm excited to welcome my guest, Dr. Mariza Snyder. She is a functional practitioner and the author of 6 books, including the DASH Diet Cookbook and her most recent book, The Essential Oils Hormone Solution. She has been featured on Fox News, MindBodyGreen, Dr. Oz, the HuffingtonPost, and Women's Health, Shape, and Self magazines. She's been very busy. She has lectured at wellness centers, hospitals, conferences, and corporations on hormone health and essential oils, nutrition, and detoxification. And she is also the host of the Essentially You podcast. And so in today's episode, we're going to jump in and talk about essential oils and their impact on hormonal health, a topic that I'm really excited to dive into because we have never really talked about essential oils on the podcast. So welcome to the show, Dr. Mariza.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. And in our pre-chat, I was congratulating you on your new book. So that's really exciting. I'm just really curious. I think a great place to start would be, what drew you to essential oils in your practice? I mean, you wrote a whole book about it. So something must have triggered your interest.
It's the only book out there right now, so far. So yeah, that's a great question. So really, I've had a couple of different health journeys along the way that have led me here. But the big one, the one that has really kind of shaped who I am today and shaped the work that I do, was that when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I completely had what I considered, it felt like hormone chaos. It felt like my body was out of control. I had horrible chronic fatigue. I had migraines. I was putting on weight for no reason. I was terrible mood swings, PMS. I mean, everything just felt like I just felt like I didn't have control of what was going on in my body, and I didn't really know what was going on. Once I figured it out, there wasn't really an integrative plan to get my body back on track. When I went to conventional doctors just to get tests run, the things that were being recommended were birth control and anti-anxiety medications. And that just wasn't what I knew what was going on with my body. I knew that wasn't the root cause. I definitely knew that those things weren't going to get me back on track. So I started to dig deep. My background before I was a practitioner was that I was a biochemist, and I was a scientist for many years prior. Literally had a lab coat with my name embroidered on it and spent a lot of time in a microscope. And so I've always been a really great researcher. So I went and started digging in because I knew that there had to be answers. And one of the first answers that I came across was nutrition, like how nutrition can help to reset hormones, to help heal the body, help detox the body. So nutrition was a big thing. Self-care was a massive thing. And just believing that I was worthy enough that my health mattered. I think that for so long I had neglected myself. That's why I had ended up there. And one of the things that wasn't healing for me over the course of these 3 to 4 years as I was on this healing journey was I repetitively had been getting sick for as long as I could remember. And we're talking about colds, flus, strep throats, the whole thing. And let's be honest, nobody ever wants a cold or a flu or strep throat, like none of that combination. But I would get sick anywhere between 7 to 10 times a year. And when I was sick, that meant I couldn't see patients. And it just it wasn't a great quality of life. So I didn't know what I could do. I was doing echinacea and tinctures and tons of vitamins. I mean, I had done the research on boosting the immune system. And it was around that time that a dear friend of mine was visiting me. And she was just like, I am really sick and tired of you being sick and tired all the time is basically what she told me. And she gave me this oil blend. And this blend had like eucalyptus and clove and citrus oils and I forget exactly what was all in it, rosemary. And it was designed to really boost the immune system, boost the white blood cells, and help to fight whatever's going on inside of the body. And let me tell you, even though I was a scientist by practice, I didn't do the research. I was really just a patient in that moment. And I was like, so how do I use this? I was like putting it in my tea. I was practically bathing in this oil, I swear to goodness. And I was diffusing it. But even though I was probably overusing it at the time, because I just didn't really understand the power of these oils, I did not get sick for almost pretty much 3.5 years. I went from sick 7 to 10 times a year to nothing for 3.5 years. I'll tell you what, that woke me up. I was like, what is this? Mm-hmm. And started digging into the research and found out that these beautiful compounds had a lot of healing power.
Well, that is a really interesting story. So, after having had that experience, and mm-hmm. now knowing what you know, so you've piqued my interest. So what was it about those oils? How did it do it? How did it prevent you from getting sick?
So I'll tell you. So I was so fascinated. I'm like, what is up with this blend? What is it doing? And the cool thing about it is the oils in that blend that I mentioned, like eucalyptus and clove and rosemary, are actually, in a way, they act as antivirals. And basically what happens is, and I don't know if people know what a virus actually does. It's basically a protein coat with viral DNA in it. And a virus has a way of injecting that DNA into a host cell, into one of our cells. And depending on what it's targeting, goes in and hijacks our DNA. It's literally out of the movie Alien, right? This is what viruses do. This is exactly how they operate. And then they go in, they hijack the DNA, they make bajillions of themselves. And then once they make so many, they take over the cell and the cell lyses open, right? It opens and the viruses spill out and they go and infect more host cells. I mean, it's literally,
that's really gross.
It's really scary. So no wonder why once you get a virus, you go from 0 to 100 with that cold or that flu real fast because they proliferate so quickly. Well, an oil, what we know about some of those oils is that they can penetrate into the cell wall. We call it a lipid phosphomembrane, a fatty membrane. That's why fats are so important because every cell is coated with them. So they go into there, the oils do, and they can actually stop the replication of this viral DNA to our DNA. So that's how it works in some instances. So if you can get an oil like that on you fast enough, you can actually stop the proliferation of these viruses into host cells.
That's really fascinating.
That's just that particular method. They clearly do so much more than that. But if you ask specifically what was the mechanism for that, and you can see it in a microscope, there's articles and research on it. It's really cool.
Well, so I think a lot of these questions will kind of come out throughout our interview, but the questions that I have right off the bat, I mean, I've heard a lot of things about essential oils and so have a lot of women. And so it's kind of like, there's certain oils that might be safe, others that might not, and in what dose and when can you take them and can you have them when you're pregnant? So I don't expect us to go through all of that like this second, but maybe you could share with us, what are the main ways that we would use oils? I know you mentioned like, I don't know, ingesting them and diffusing them. But so how do we bring essential oils into our life?
Yes. Well, the easiest way and probably the most impactful way is going to be through aromatherapy. So we're going to leverage leverage what we call olfaction, which is the olfactory senses. And what's so cool about olfaction is that we not only have olfactory receptors clearly inside of the olfactory bulb and in the brain, but we also have them in our lungs. Because what a lot of people don't know is that our sense of smell is directly and intrinsically connected to our survival. Like literally, our sense of smell is more powerful than any other sense that we have because it is so important and necessary for our survival as a species. So leveraging the power of aromatherapy, not only can we make powerful, profound changes in the brain via emotional well-being, stress, cognitive function, fixing neurological pathways, all of that, boosting mitochondrial production. We also, by breathing the oils into the lungs, they cross through the alveoli into the bloodstream and bam, they're in the system. And so I always love to give an example of like a blueberry. I ask people all the time, well, what does a blueberry do in the body, right? And people are like, well, blueberries are antioxidants. And then some people I remember I had a good friend of mine whose mom used to always say, a blueberries a day will keep the memory. You're like literally will keep your memory. They're great memory boosters. But what is it about a blueberry that boosts our memory? I'd love to know. And I actually know exactly what that is. But so blueberries, yes, they have antioxidants, polyphenols, vitamins, minerals, fiber. I mean, my goodness, those little guys are packed with all kinds of goodness. But the thing about it is that all of that gets broken down into the body in a molecular and biochemical way, right? And then our bodies, its intelligence, our cells, our organs, we make decisions on how that's going to be used in the body. So maybe the liver one day is like, man, you know what? I'm going to need to take all the vitamins from that blueberry. Or maybe your big toe is like, I need some polyphenols today. And so your body gets to decide what it's going to do with that chemistry and how we break it down, which is so marvelous. Same thing with essential oils. We've got, let's say, a lavender, and we've got linalool acetate and linalool. Well, guess what? Our bodies have a really profound way of utilizing those beautiful chemical constituents in an assortment of ways. Maybe it's to quell inflammation, or maybe it's to ease the amygdala. I mean, there's just so many profound ways that particular oil of lavender can help and support our bodies.
Well, that's really interesting.
That's the one and easiest way to use them. I just wanted to just demonstrate the profound impact that aromatherapy, simply diffusing oils or simply opening up a bottle of an oil could do for you. That was just kind of giving you a little taste of that. The next is topical. And this is how I originally learned to use the oils. As a practitioner, I really want to solve the problem, right? And I really do believe in getting to the root cause of the problem. But while you're struggling, I also would love to see a resolution for that symptom as well. And so when I was first studying the oils and recommending them to my patients, it was like, okay, you've got a stomach ache, here's an oil for that. You've got a respiratory concern, here's an oil for that. You've got a sore elbow, here's an oil for that. So there were very specific oils. You're fighting a cold or whatever. Here's an oil to boost the immune system, that kind of a thing. And so topical is a great way for path of least resistance. You're dealing with menstrual cramps. I got an oil for that, right? And so you're applying them topically, diluted. I love them in little rollers. I have rollers everywhere around the house. And we're just always using oils depending on what's going on. My husband had a canker sore yesterday. We were using oils for that. And so that's how I love to think about using oils topically is that as long as they're diluted and you're using them in a relatively safe manner, which they're actually quite safe to use, you can really address some major kind of acute stuff that comes up, like everyday health issues that just kind of pop up by us accidentally running into cutting our foot when we're running into the house or something like that.
Okay, so we have diffusing and topical. I'm still kind of fascinated by, we've all heard of aromatherapy. I'm still fascinated by the idea that you can diffuse essential oils, and in addition to just smelling nice, they're actually going to kind of get into your cells and do some great work in there.
Oh, yeah. So I've got blends running all around the house. It's part of my morning ritual every single day is to get the diffusers going. And it's of no surprise that we've got about 7 diffusers in the house. 4 are running as we speak. 5 are running. I don't know. So I got a bunch. I have a little, how you water the plants, I don't know why I can't come up with the name of that. So
watering
yeah, exactly. I water my diffusers every day. And then I have a bundle of oils sitting next to every diffuser, depending on what we want. But we have workstations. We work out of our home, and we have diffusers next to each workstation. And we have this blend that literally boosts alertness, cognitive function, and boosts memory so that we're really locked in to whatever we're creating. And so Usually those oils are like any citrus oil, because citrus oils boost serotonin levels and dopamine levels. We use peppermint because peppermint oxygenates the brain and brings more oxygen to the lungs, kind of wakes you up. And then rosemary is an oil that we know will boost working memory by 75%. So we have these little pre-made, what I call get it done blends, or brain fog be gone blends that it's already pre-made in a bottle. And then I just put those into the diffuser.
Well, and I think I'm making an assumption that the listeners know what essential oils are and kind of what differs. And so maybe share with us on a very practical standpoint, because I'm sure some of the listeners are going to be like, well, this sounds really interesting. Let me go grab myself some essential oils. Or if they have essential oils already, maybe they want to start using them differently. So maybe break down for us, like, what is an essential oil, how it differs maybe from other types of, preparations. And also how can we, like, more information about how can we know if we're getting like a good quality oil, or like, because I know there's a lot of debate about that.
There's a lot of crap out there. I'm just going to tell you that it's not a regulated market, just like produce isn't really a regulated market either, right? Or even supplements. Oh my gosh, what an unregulated market that can be. And so absolutely, it's an unregulated market, but luckily there's a lot of great oils out there. So just a heads up. I mean, clearly it wouldn't be one of my areas of expertise if I didn't know that there were oils that really delivered the things that I was saying here on this episode. So, this has been such a wonderful journey for me to explore the power of creating a non-toxic home, or eliciting powerful changes with plant-based medicine. And so my first book, which was called The Smart Mom's Guide to Essential Oils, it wasn't really so much a book about moms. That's just what the publishers wanted, but it was a book about anyone in their home who wanted to create natural solutions, but also wanted to understand what oils were and how they worked. And so in the course of doing that book, I interviewed over 200 people, mostly women, because it's usually who's bringing oils into the house. And I was like, okay, what are your concerns, your fears? What do you really need to know? What's keeping you from using them? And based on what those concerns were, or that interest in those questions, I built an entire book on the whole thing. And so that would be really such a great resource for people. But what they are is they are plants. They are secondary metabolites of plants, and not all plants. I mean, all plants definitely have oils on them, but not all of them we leverage for our own personal biochemical usage, but a lot of them we can. So these plants come from all over the world, from Africa, from India, from Guatemala, from Australia, from New Zealand, from Canada, from Asia. I mean, name it, they come from everywhere. And we're leveraging these powerful secondary metabolites that are really the plant's protector. They help the plant to reproduce. They help the plant to fend off other environmental threats. They are really designed for the plant's survival. And so we are leveraging that chemistry for our own benefit. Now, oils can either be steam distilled or cold pressed. Usually citruses are cold pressed from the rind, and then all the other plants are steam distilled. It's basically, those are the biggest ways to get those oils. And then, the really important thing is once these oils are harvested, and hopefully in a very sustainable way with farmers who really know how to take care of these plants, then they get steam distilled, and then they're tested for impurities, or tested to ensure that it's a pure oil. And there's very specific things that we're looking for in that. Now, there's technically a battery of anywhere between 9, or for some companies, maybe only 3 tests, up to like 11 tests of purification. The more tests that are ran on the oils, the more the company is committed to the purity of the oil, and the more money they're spending to ensure that the oils are pure. And there's definitely several companies that are absolutely willing to spend the money to ensure that they've got a pure product, because ultimately what they want is that their customers are getting the results that they deserve. So anytime I tell people, if you're looking at oils, one of the biggest red flags at a store, at a Whole Foods or a natural food store, is if all the oils are priced the same, that's a major red flag, because it's completely impossible to have a lavender be the same price as a lemon oil, or a lavender be the same price as a frankincense. Like they're done. A lemon oil is very inexpensive. Lavender still takes a big chunk of flowers to make a lavender oil, and frankincense, it's so labor consuming and so rare of an oil that it's priced way above either of those two. So those are the things that you want to be looking for. But really what you're looking for is, does a company disclose where their oils come from? Who's harvesting these oils? And then how are they testing them? Do they work with a third-party company? Do they list the type of testing procedures that they do on their oils? As a biochemist, I used to purify mitochondrial DNA and proteins in a lab. And so I know a lot of the testing procedures that are necessary to ensure that you've got a pure substance. You've got something very pure like an oil. And so when I look for a company, I'm looking to see those same practices.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. So I'm excited. I want to start, using essential oils. How do I figure out, because there's a difference between just kind of like buying a little tea tree oil and putting it with your cleaning supplies or something versus what you're talking about, which is using essential oils essentially, therapeutically to some degree. Mm-hmm. So where does one go then to kind of learn about what these different oils can do and learn about like how they can strategically place these oils and use them for health purposes?
I feel like you're setting me up for success.
Well, I've been doing this for a while and I'm a very curious, well, yes, of course. I'm a very curious person, but just you can kind of imagine for somebody who, for them, it's completely new.
Totally. Absolutely.
And so it's like, well, this sounds really interesting, but like, what do I do? Right? Like, how do I get into this? Because it feels like a thing. I've spoken to some women who are really into certain, I won't list any brands, but like who are into certain brands and like it's a thing and they sell it and all of that kind of stuff. And so it's like a club, it's like a group, and we do the essential oils.
There are over, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine how many millions of people around the world are using essential oils. It's got to be over 30 million people at this point. It has to be. I know it's at least 25 million people around the world. You'll be hard pressed to find a friend who isn't using them at this point. That's how popular and mainstream they've become. Yes, there's a lot of great resource books out there. 100%. There's a lot of great resource books out there. What I had found when I was recommending oils to my patients, to my readers, I had a couple of resource books that I was recommending, and those books had a lot of information, but they didn't give a lot of clarity. Like, let's say you looked up anxiousness. These books would list like 25 oils, and it would be really, I was like, well, which one? Like, which one is going to work for me? And that can be really daunting when you're like, well, here's all the 25 oils that you can use for this particular concern. And you'll just get anxiety looking at the list. That's really what happens. And so we were recommending these resource books that were a little out of control. Not to say that they aren't great to have on hand as well, but that's really the reason why I wrote the Smart Moms Guide, is I wanted to make it feel so simple. So in that book, I have a top 25 list, and I really base the entire book on that 25 list. And even 25 can feel like a bit of oils. Maybe not to me, a girl who has like 130 oils, but I felt like a resource book should be a resource book. So giving you just a top 5 list or a top 10 list felt short-sighted, because there were so many wonderful oils that you're like, oh my gosh, this is the one that really resonates with me. So I have a top 25 list in the first book. And then it's broken into chapters where it's everyday health concerns, how to make over your cleaning cabinet, how to make over your medicine cabinet, and how to make over your personal care. Because the biggest pressing concern that kept coming up for me with the women that I was working with is they were concerned about toxicity. They were concerned about the over-the-counter stuff that they were using, and they were concerned about even their cleaning products. I work with a lot of women who have hormone issues, and so endocrine disruptors is huge. For me, the reason why we got into oils was that my estrogen levels were so out of control because I was using something or multiple things that was driving a lot of fake estrogen into the system, into my body. And I was like, all right, enough is enough. We've got to break up with this stuff. And if you come to my house today, there is absolutely not one over-the-counter anything from CVS or Walgreens, because we use oils for everything first. Now, if for some reason the oils don't do the job, for whatever reason, I've got doctors and I've got practitioners and I've got CVS. CVS ain't going anywhere, right? I can always lend to that if I have to. But in the last 6.5 years, being a practitioner myself, we just haven't ever had to. It's never come up.
Mm-hmm. Well, so this is something
that would be the book.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this is something that I think we're all kind of looking for ways to improve health naturally, especially the women who are listening to this podcast. And so one of the things that you talk about in the book is the use of oils to balance female hormones and things like that. So of course that's going to be of particular interest to my audience. So I mean, a lot of different women listen to this podcast, but I mean, this podcast is about fertility awareness, understanding and connecting with your menstrual cycle, demythifying, I just made up that word, but demythifying a lot of the incorrect things that we're taught about our bodies. So, a lot of women are kind of already there. Like they're already throwing out their cleaning supplies with the xenoestrogens and trying to sort out their, all the different things that they're putting on their body and replacing it with natural alternatives. And a lot of women are making their own products and kind of dabbling in essential oils, but maybe not in a very specific way. Maybe literally like, I like the smell of this, so I'm going to use it. So share with us some of the applications of essential oils to balance hormones, because I think that's a really interesting aspect of it.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I like to look at, one of the number one precursors I find for us as women, and I don't know if you can relate to this or if this is what you've seen as well, this is what I see so much, is that we are living in a time where we are so grateful to have the opportunities that we are being allotted. I feel like I stand on the shoulders of my grandmother and my mother to get to be not only just to be a practitioner, to have been a scientist and then to be a practitioner, be able to switch careers, you know what I'm saying? And go back to school and then get to write books. This is book number 7 for me. I don't know if my grandma would have had the same opportunities as I have, but I'll tell you what, I took that opportunity and I hightailed it. Like I sprinted for years because I was like, oh my gosh, this opportunity to do the things that so many women haven't had the opportunity to do. I'm not going to miss that opportunity. I'm going for it. In the interim, though, I completely destroyed myself, right? I didn't pay attention to my body. I suffered from, sympathetic dominance or overdrive syndrome or superwoman syndrome or I had rushing women syndrome like nobody's business. Like I literally ran from one thing to the next every single day because I learned at a young age that if you run to things, you can get to them faster. So I would run to things, literally. I was working out as I was getting to a meeting. And eventually I ran myself into the ground. And so I find that that's so often the case for what's happening with women is that we're stressed, we're overwhelmed, we're overworked because we're trying to not only have this beautiful life for ourselves for really, this last couple generations we've had it, but we're also still doing the thing that culture has always taught us to do. And that's to take care of our family, to be nurturing, to be dutiful, to do the obligations and to people please. And so for me, I feel like a lot of hormones can get out of whack when we're running an overdrive. And so one of those hormones that I feel plays a big role here is cortisol. Cortisol can absolutely steal from estrogen and progesterone. It can deregulate insulin levels. It can throw off the thyroid. It can throw off the gut, create leaky gut. It can even hijack our brain. Because when we're in a state of survival, it's the only thing that matters. So one of the things I love to use essential oils for is really calming down and disrupting that overdrive syndrome. And we can leverage the power of aromatherapy to do that. Gosh knows, it was my biggest saving grace. And so a simple blend of just lavender and bergamot or lavender and clary sage or cedarwood. And there's so many great, I could give you a list of 20 oils that will reduce stress levels and disrupt the stress response. But we know that certain oils can actually lower serum cortisol levels and lower heart rate and lower blood pressure by simply breathing them in. So that lavender and that bergamot, 2 powerful and profound oils, can actually stop cortisol from stealing progesterone and estrogen in a way that is helping to balance out cortisol, so where our body doesn't think that we absolutely need more of it. So that's one of the things that I educate women in is how do we get our stress under control? How do we step out of this overdrive syndrome where once you're in that state, you're constantly triggered back into that state? I know for me, I survived in that state for years and honestly didn't even know it. It was such an unconscious act.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So as you were talking, it was really fully resonating with me. But just as a little side note, so, it's interesting because your book is coming out. My book just came out. And I don't know how your experience was of that, but my experience was it was quite stressful, and just like quite stressful.
Oh goodness! Oh yeah, it's been a wild, Mr. Ride. I always call it Mr. Toe's wild ride, is what it feels like. I always tell people you gotta know what you're stepping into when you decide you want to put a book out. It's one thing to write a book, as you know, but it's another thing to get the book out into the world.
Yeah, that was the stressful part.
That's the stressful part.
Well, and as you were talking about, so I'll kind of get to my question, because as you were talking about, lavender and bergamot, so like I was really just, in the midst of all the crazy, and my husband's actually more into scents than I. So, I'm usually busy and whatever, but he's the one that's going to set the tone. He's the one that's going to, and I don't mean this in a sexual way. I mean it just in life. Like he's the one that's going to put on music when just all the time. He's the one that's going to like make sure that there's something.
He sets the mood.
Yeah.
He creates the environment.
Yeah.
It matters to him.
And I just want to clarify, because it's not like, it's not only.
No, you mean like, but everything
in life,
is about
like in general. Yeah. So, at some point I was so super, super stressed, and I decided that I needed to like literally, and I'm not like I take baths, but I'm not a bath person. You know how some people would take a bath every week? I take a bath when I'm super stressed. I mean, I should take a bath every week, but I think I'm going with this. So anyways, so I'm sitting in the tub, right? Like he put out the candle for me. Like he's doing the whole, like setting the tone, 'cause that's what he does. And it had nothing to do with any type of thing. It was literally just me being stressed and needing to relax. And of course, he pulls in the lavender essential oils and whatever, and like fills the tub with all of that. And I'm just sitting there. So as you were talking about the impact of the oil on cortisol levels, it made me think, because I'm sure like in general, having a nice warm bath is going to be helpful. I had some magnesium in there. But then I never really thought about the specific role of the oils in impacting cortisol levels. And so anyways, I was just having this moment of kind of like reflecting on how I inadvertently was doing that.
He sabotaged your stress with that chemistry, which is great.
But then I could use that, like with the knowledge that you're sharing, we can really tap into that and then be more intentional about it, is what I was thinking.
Absolutely. And like it or not, and I don't know, maybe some people are like, I'm kind of loving this surviving on stress stuff. Well, you're going to love it until you're not. You know what I'm saying? But let me, the thing about the chemistry, it's twofold here. One, there's something to be said about mindfulness and intention, right? And if it maybe it was your husband, or maybe it was you, or maybe you're doing it for somebody else, but someone's being intentional about setting you up for success. But like it or not, the chemistry is chemistry. And you put lavender in that tub, or you start diffusing lavender in a room. That's why moms are constantly diffusing oils in bedrooms of their kids or in the kitchen during study time, because the chemistry is going to shift you whether you're ready for it or not. So, I think that most people don't want to feel in overdrive or overworked or overstressed. So leveraging that chemistry, it only takes a couple seconds to make the change, to make the shift. It's probably the fastest and easiest thing we've got. So that's what I love. For other hormones, I work with a lot of women who struggle with PMS, although my demographic is so often 35 and older. Usually it's women who have been doing so much for people for so long, they're finally getting to a point where things are shifting and they're really beginning to feel the repercussions of it. Although I think we're seeing that in younger and younger women these days as well. Hence me, late 20s, early 30s. It happened to me earlier because I was running full force since I was in high school. But very often, I'm working with women who are struggling with PMS or with menstrual cramps. And we do know that oils like clary sage and lavender can actually relax smooth muscles. And so if you're dealing with cramps, those are great oils for that. But if it's mood swings that you're dealing with, or if it's cravings that you're dealing with, or it's mental chatter that you can't seem to shut off as well, leveraging the power of this chemistry can really help support you, really elicit the changes and the kind of those feel-good moments that we're really looking for. So how I love to think about oils, because oils are not hormones. Yes, they can clear receptor sites. Yes, they can create more cell to hormone communication. And yes, they can have a profound impact in balancing them, but technically not hormones. Just like food isn't hormones either. I mean, food can lend to building hormones and giving nutrients for them, but they're technically not the actual chemical messenger themselves, right? That's being elicited through environmental cues, through your body communicating with itself. And so, but we can have a lot of profound change through lifestyle, through nutrition, through oils, in changing and supporting hormones. And I think that's the big lesson. So I don't want people to think that oils are hormones. An oil isn't just going to go in and act as testosterone, right? But can oils be used as libido boosters? Absolutely, even if testosterone is on a lower side. So that's kind of how I want people to understand how oils work for our bodies. Your body is going to leverage that chemistry in a way that creates balance and homeostasis. And so often that has to do with hormone production.
Well, and how could this, I think that you've probably already answered the question because we're talking about supporting hormone production. And I know you have a part in the book where you talk about libido specifically. I think that I should ask the question for the ladies who heard you say that at the very beginning of the podcast, you were talking about period pain and you were like, I've got an oil for that. And I'm sure that there was at least like however many hundred people that were like, which ones?
Yeah, which ones? Which is the menstrual cramp blend?
Yeah. So maybe share a little bit about that, but also what could be particularly, I think the cortisol, I feel like what you just talked about cannot be understated because of course that's going to support menstrual cycle health and fertility. But if there's anything else that comes in mind for women who are thinking about that, they're thinking about, their menstrual cycle, balancing hormones, and possibly even preparing for pregnancy.
Yeah, I'm going to share a quick 4-step process that I feel can really help to enhance fertility. And, it's a lot of it's really, I would consider to be advice that a lot of women know. I don't know if it's going to be new, but then how can we leverage oils to really create that life for us in a really natural and healthy way, I think is kind of the nuance that's different. But I am going to share my menstrual cramp blend first before we do anything at all. Mm-hmm. So it is a 10 ml roller. And by the way, I list all of my hormone blends and my memory boosting blends, basically all of my favorite blends that are in the new book. We create beautiful little images for them on Instagram. So if you guys ever go to @Dr. Mariza, you're going to find all. I got my Love Your Liver blend up there. I've got your PMS support blend. I've got all kind. Brain fog be gone, sugar be gone. Name it. It's these beautiful having to leverage in those emergency moments where you're not feeling your best, or you feel like, again, your brain is being hijacked by cravings. To have a tool that you win the stare down contest with the cupcake, man, it's a game changer. It changes everything. I want to win the stare down contest with that chocolate cupcake every time. Okay, so here's the menstrual cramp relief blend. So it's a 10 ml roller, and you guys can get these rollers anywhere, everywhere. Amazon's got a gajillion of them. 10 ml roller. And the recipe is 8 drops of clary sage, because clary sage is literally the Beyonce of hormone essential oils. Okay, So clary sage, 8 drops of clary sage, 7 drops of lavender. And remember how these two actually help decrease prostaglandin response and uterine cramps there. 6 drops of frankincense, because frankincense is amazing as a cellular support oil, particularly during that time. Copaiba is a powerful endocannabinoid. It's a natural endocannabinoid, so it helps to control the pain there. And then peppermint is also a beautiful natural analgesic, but it's also an astringent, which means it drives the other oils deeper into the tissue. So 8 drops clary sage, 7 drops lavender, 6 drops frankincense, 6 drops copaiba, and 6 drops peppermint. You add all the oils into the roller, top it off with grapeseed oil, fractionated coconut oil, jojoba oil, whatever carrier oil you prefer, avocado oil. And then you literally just apply it to the area of concern, right? So right on that lower abdominal area, about 2 to 3 inches below the belly button.
Well, and so,
then within less than 3 minutes, they're just gone. It's the poof magic.
Well,
it's just amazing.
So my question for you, because there's a lot of working with women over the years. I teach women to chart their cycles, and so over the years, a lot of women have really, really bad pain, right? As someone who also had really, really bad pain for years, like the 9 out of the 9 or 10 on the 10 scale. Yeah, what are we talking about here? What kind of relief are we? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm sure there's some women that are like, yeah, but come on, I throw up when I have my period.
Well, that's a level of pain that this probably won't completely eradicate, but it will. These are power player oils. These are power pain oils. And every woman I've had use this blend over the last 5 years or so have had incredible success with it. So, and it definitely, if anything, what's your other option? You're talking about non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. You're talking about gut permeability. You're talking about liver damage. If that oil can buy you grace so that you don't have to take those, at least, half the dose, or decrease the dose by a quarter, or maybe you only take them once. For as far as I'm concerned as a practitioner, that's a win.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really fascinating. And you mentioned they kind of disappear. So they fully, are absorbed quite quickly. And also
Yes, they
have the specific inflammation reducing quality of lowering prostaglandin levels, which women who have the horrible pain have been shown to have significantly more. So that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's about consistency. Oils are like very similar in a sense of nutrition. They get metabolized very quickly. That means the body is like, give it to me, give it to me. And that's a good thing. We don't want this. We don't want anything floating around the body forever. Toxins do that. Synthetic drugs do that. We want the body to be like, sign me up, give it to me and let me use it. And then let's move on. So when it comes to that kind of thing, we use them within about 2 to 3 hours. And so we're talking about, when you're dealing with that, your consistent application is super important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy. You just got to roll your pants down. I was so funny. My mom, I picked her up from the airport. It must have been 6 or 7 years ago. And she was, we were healing her from hot flashes. She was in menopause at that point, and she was having some pretty insane menopause symptoms. But hot flashes were one of the things that she was really trying to kick. And I had my Superwoman blend that we've had forever. It's my hormone magic oil, and she travels with it. I mean, she never leaves home without it. And this flight was literally like 45 minutes. It was going from like LA to Oakland, California, because that's where I lived at the time. And I remember she comes, I'm picking her up from the airport. She had left her blend at home, and she wasn't having that many hot flashes at that point, but she got it. I didn't even say anything to me. She got into my purse. She got into my oil bag. She pulled out my Superwoman blend. She pulled down her pants, like literally right there, picking her up at the airport. And she rolled it over her ovaries. And she finally, after she had done this whole thing, I'm just watching her. And she finally was like, oh, thank goodness. And then she finally said hello to me. And then the next thing she said is, I'm keeping this for the entire weekend. So
that's really neat. I don't know. I think this is really fascinating because, like I said, even in our pre-chat, essential oils are definitely not an area of specialty for me. I talk about vaginas a lot. I don't talk about essential oils a lot. So this is super fascinating. And also just the effect that it can have. It's a really interesting and different mode of action. And of course, one of the great things about it is it's not invasive. So it kind of begs the question, right? It's kind of like what you said about the NSAIDs, the drugs that we typically use to treat menstrual cycle issues. So as women, I suppose for anybody, we need to have options that are just to give us a little bit of some space between the constant pharmaceutical push. Everything is pharmaceutical. I think a lot of us really want to be able to address these issues without always having to turn to drugs.
Absolutely. Well, the reason why I became a practitioner to begin with was migraines. I had chronic migraines for 15 years. I literally lived in a world of chronic pain. And I can't tell you how many times I was told I was going to have to live with that pain for the rest of my life. And there was definitely a good chunk of that time, that 15 years, where I saddled up on that. I believed that wholeheartedly. I didn't know anything different. And today, it's pretty rare that I get them. When I was in that crazy state, I was definitely getting them again. But I've gotten them over the years. It's usually a key warning sign that I need to get it. I need to get back on track. But I've rarely, if ever, have used anything ever since then. I use oils for that. And, migraine pain is next level, kind of like how you're describing some menstrual pain. I mean, if I had menstrual cramps that have woken me up in the middle of the night, absolutely they have. And I know where the oils are. I put them on and I'm back to sleep, right? And so same thing with the migraine pain. I don't want to take, I ruined my gut. I did damage to my liver all those years that I was surviving off of Excedrin, migraine, and Imitrex and all of that. I really can't afford to go back to pain meds. I kind of blew it already for those 10 years or so that I was on those meds. And I love that I can leverage the power of oils anytime something like that comes up for me. And I've never had to turn to migraine medicine ever again. And that's speaking from another place of living in chronic pain for so long.
Well, thank you for sharing that. So many women struggle with migraines, and for many women, it's related to where they are in their cycle. So for a lot of women, they're more likely to experience that either before menstruation or around menstruation, or, every woman is different. So there's no rule, but there's often a correlation. And so would you share with us, the migraine strategy, like what types of oils you use and how you use them? Because I know there's women who hear that, who actually, are still struggling with chronic migraines or regular migraines all the time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, so we don't really understand exactly what's going on there. And I had a lot of patients. I had a migraine practice in a lot of ways, but a lot of women were dealing with hormone issues, and when we see the plummeting of those hormones during the end of our luteal phase, oh my gosh, we don't really understand the neuro implications for that, and migraines tend to arise. And so the blend, there's similar properties to the blend I mentioned earlier for the menstrual cramps, because again, these are natural analgesics. These are calming basically the muscles in that particular area. So it's another roller, because I think it's the easiest way to apply these particular oils. So it's going to be 10 drops of frankincense, 10 drops of peppermint, 10 drops of lavender, and then 5 drops of the copaiba. Top that off with coconut oil or whatever oil you prefer. And then it's really about, just like you would any other time, once you're full-fledged in a migraine, honestly, it's like a freight train. There's no stopping it, in my experience of treating thousands of people. But if you can catch it when you know the warning signs, when you start to feel the sound, everyone's got triggers. And so it's that moment where you want to get the oils on as quickly as possible, because you could literally beat it out. So that would be my blend. And it's just applying it wherever the origin of the migraine starts. For me, it's always unilateral on the left-hand side, right around my upper cervical area, my upper neck.
Okay. So you actually kind of put it in, like on your head, like in that area.
I put it everywhere I can feel it coming on. Oh, I'm putting it on. I am, I'm rolling it, and it stays right next to me, as I'm trying to, because for me, a migraine takes about 90 minutes to manifest into full-fledged danger zone. Like there's a point of no return. And so if I can beat the point of no return, I win the battle. I win. I don't get to be in pain for the next 18 hours or whatever it could be.
Yeah, I mean, migraines, I have so much empathy, because, I mean, I don't experience migraines now. When I was a teenager, like, I put the pieces together, like, later. I was on the pill when I was a teenager, and that's really the only time I ever had migraines. And it was insane, because I was so young, I didn't even know what was going on. But I had the thing, like, what's the word for the thing you see? The halo.
The aura.
Yeah. And like, it just feels like someone's stepping on your brain, really.
Oh yeah, my gosh. Or someone's sticking an ice pick through your eye.
Yeah. So this is really, really fascinating. And again, non-invasive. I mean, so I know we meandered, because I ask a lot of questions. I'm still curious about kind of specific implications for fertility. And I'm also curious about just general kind of safety, because I know women, as soon as they get pregnant or when they're trying to conceive, they would have the question of, okay, so if I'm actively trying to get pregnant, can I continue to use essential oils even after ovulation and things like that? If I might be pregnant, does that impact anything? And like, can you overdo it? All that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Those are two other podcasts.
Yes. I know we can't go into all of it.
So oils for fertility, right? So I kind of look at fertility, is there one specific oil for fertility? Not necessarily. I do have an enhanced fertility blend, and I can share that. I think it's, it's an integrative process, and you're working with a practitioner in that process as well. And, there's all different things that could be going wrong. There could be concerns. It could be the pituitary. It could be, the luteal phase dysfunction. There's just so many things that are going on. So I always recommend working with a functional practitioner to have an integrative approach. But what I have learned, just getting your body ready, maybe it's not even that you're having fertility concerns, but you just want to make sure that you're fertile. And I think that fertility is just a key indicator that we're really healthy as women as well. So number one is just really helping, one of the things I think is important is stress. It's just making sure that when we're in a survival state, the body doesn't feel safe to create a baby. It's not a safe environment. We know that when we're in a survival state, that our reproductive system and our digestive system is kind of put to the wayside, because that's not where we're focusing our energy right now. We're focusing our energy on that tiger behind us, or the meeting that we're late to, right? So stress is a big one. I love oils like bergamot and lavender, Roman chamomile, clary sage for, again, controlling the stress response. Self-care is a big part of that. Next is reducing your toxic load. And we talked more about that, and that women are very mindful about endocrine disruptors and how we can use oils like lavender and lemon and grapefruit and tea tree oil to make over our cleaning products, or, to make deodorant or whatever it is that we want to make that just we know is keeping us a little bit safer. So that's reducing our toxic load. And then number 3, I think, is a big one that I find people don't necessarily pay as much attention to, but that is supporting the gut microbiome. How are we treating our gut? Because how we treat our gut is how we really are treating everything else in the body. It's such the pathway into really ensuring that we've got the right nutrients, our hormones are being created. I mean, there's so much that goes on here. So important that we're eating a lot of gut healthy foods like the color of the rainbow, green leafy vegetables, healthy proteins and healthy fats. I think those are really important. And then reducing inflammatory foods like sugars and potentially it could be gluten or dairy, or maybe it's even caffeine. Maybe you got to break up with caffeine for a little bit. Goodness forbid you do, but just throwing it out there. And making sure that you're doing, taking a good digestive enzyme, making sure that you're getting good pre and probiotics, just so you're setting the tone for really supporting your body. There's links to, we know that gut inflammation and creating, inflammation in other parts of the body, including the reproductive system. So I think that's important. And then again, the hormones, really taking a look at the hormones and seeing what's going on there. Is, where could the concern be, and kind of dialing in. Now, I do have an enhanced fertility blend that is designed to help support estrogen and progesterone levels, is designed to help lower stress levels as well. And so women have used this oil for many, many years with wonderful success, but I wouldn't say that it's the end all be all by any means. It's just one more tool in the toolbox that you can leverage to really help regulate your cycle. And so my enhanced fertility blend is just a 12 ml roller, and a clary sage is the big power player here. Again, 12 drops of clary sage, 10 drops of geranium. And geranium is such a gorgeous essential oil. It not only helps detoxify the liver and helps the liver move estrogen out of the body, like bad estrogen. I always tell estrogen is like you use it and you lose it. You gotta send it on out. But it really does create really beautiful synergy in terms of our making sure that our menstrual cycle is working properly. 8 drops of sweet fennel, 5 drops of lavender, and 5 drops of bergamot. And so that blend, you can use it pretty much every day. A lot of women focus specifically on the follicular phase when they're using this blend, but there's no contraindication to using it all month long, part of the luteal and part of the follicular phase. So, and you just apply it over the lower abdomen, or you can use it on the ankles or the bottom of the feet. Maybe you can do it in the inner arm, whatever works for you. Oils are lipophilic, so they're going to get into the system one way or the other. I do love path of least resistance. So putting it over the ovaries and over the lower abdominal area seems to make a lot of sense for women. So that would be my enhanced fertility blend. Now, once you get pregnant, could this blend affect you? The one oil that we're always very mindful of is clary sage, because clary sage can induce contractions. And that's why, doulas and nurse practitioners love clary sage in terms of inducing labor and moving labor along. So if there was an oil that I say to break up with, the actual pure oil, it's usually clary sage. But could you accidentally be pregnant and be using clary sage in those first 5 weeks? And have any, not have an issue? Absolutely. So just know that there isn't a danger per se that you're going to be causing. But once you are pregnant, there are, I would say you want to decrease the concentration. So the concentration lessens. And in the Smart Moms book, I actually give you oils for every trimester, so that you had a great tool set. Women use oils for motion or sort of for morning sickness. They use oils for low back pain. They use oils for swollen feet. They use oils for sleep when they're pregnant. I know so many women who have just had a much more pleasant pregnancy because they've had these beautiful oils. There's very few oils that are not safe for pregnancy, but definitely, it's really easy to find out what those oils are. And clary sage is typically one of the oils that makes the list, just because we don't want to induce contractions before they are necessary.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's, again, really interesting, because I know a lot of women are really concerned about using oils, and especially what could happen during pregnancy. So yeah, so much great information that you shared with us today. If there was one thing that you would want the listener to take away from our conversation, what would it be?
Absolutely. The big message I always want to relay is that you really are the CEO of your health. You don't, anytime you feel your gut intuition is telling you something, I want you to listen to that. So often, in the landscape of conventional medicine, the status quo doesn't work for each and every one of us. So I want you to feel very empowered to be the CEO of your health. There are so many great natural tools and wonderful resources out there, practitioners that really get this message, that are designed to be a part of this healing journey. But I just want you to know that you have the ability to really take ownership of your health in a way that feels good for you. And so if anyone ever questions what you feel about your health, if anyone ever makes you doubt how you're feeling in your body, so often women I just want you to just stick to your gut, stick to what feels right for you, and be open to that second opinion, be open to that woman or that practitioner who really understands it, because you are not crazy and you have every right to go with what feels right for you.
I think those are wonderful words to end on. Dr. Mariza, thank you so much for being here. This was super fun. You've got such great energy.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, and where can the listeners go to find out more information about you and what you do, and of course to grab a copy of your books?
Absolutely. So the new book, The Essential Oils Hormone Solution, is available everywhere books are sold. Get it where you love to get books. If it's at a local bookstore, you can ask for it. Hopefully it's there. If not, you can ask to order it. Also, you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Mariza, DrMariza. I share a lot of blends there and all kinds of good information. And then I have a podcast called the Essentially You Podcast, and it's literally dedicated to having you become the CEO of your healthcare. And it's a lot of fun to share a lot of wonderful tips and advice on that podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for educating us about essential oils.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/245. I hope that you enjoyed my episode with Dr. Mariza. It was really great to have the opportunity to connect with her and to dive into a topic that I really don't have much of a background in at all. And I'm sure you could tell by the questions that I was asking, because I was learning right there beside you. It was really fascinating for me to hear a bit about the science behind essential oils and the different effects that it can have on the body, the effects that it can have, the antiviral effects that Dr. Mariza talked about, the impacts on hormones and prostaglandin production, the impact on cortisol, stress hormone production, period pain, and even cravings. I thought that it was just really, really interesting to kind of have another tool to add to your tool belt when it comes to just, living to the full extent, supporting hormone health and doing it in a way that is non-invasive and having a way to take care of yourself in your own home. Again, that's going to promote health, and also that is just not invasive, not, no downside, no side effects, all that kind of stuff. And when Dr. Mariza and I, when we stopped the recording, we were chatting a little bit afterwards. And of course, I won't say it as eloquently as she talked about, but one of the things that she mentioned was part of the reason that she's so passionate about this type of care is that, as women, we often don't, well, I don't know if I should use the word often, but there are times when we don't necessarily feel like we deserve to be pampered and feel like worthy of just taking time for ourselves. As women, we're often givers. We're often giving of ourselves. We're doing for others, putting everyone before ourselves, and really just, running around and helping everybody else. And meanwhile, not always stopping to fill our own tank. And what I loved about what she said was that with essential oils, it's an interesting way to really introduce it's a way to introduce self-care, but because essential oils are so luxurious, they smell so lovely, like you really, if you take some time, even if it's just 5 minutes in the car before you come inside, that was one of her examples, or if you actually take the time to, sit down and draw yourself a bath and use essential oils and really create like a spa at home experience for yourself, you're really able to give yourself this lovely, wonderful, beautiful, luxurious experience that then in turn has these really positive impacts on your health, which is really interesting. And really tying that into self-care, I think that just gives us another way to take care of ourselves, another way to de-stress. One of the most challenging aspects of just charting and hormone balancing that my clients face, something that I talk about with every client that comes up in every group program that I do, is stress management. Because when you chart your cycles using fertility awareness, you can actually see the impacts of stress on your chart, whether that is a specific acute stressful event that delays ovulation in the pre-ovulatory phase, or whether it is like a chronic stressor that's causing your luteal phase to be short every month, and you can see other markers of stress on your cycle. Like, regardless of how, often stress really is the first time as women that we're seeing a tangible effect of stress, because it's a very kind of out there kind of concept. But when you start to chart your cycles, you can often see a very specific impact of stress in very specific ways in your cycle. And so that always lends itself to the question, well, what do I do? How do I reduce cortisol? How do I increase my progesterone? What do I do to manage stress? And having just an additional tool and an additional way to really boost your natural hormone levels, a way to manage stress, a way to lower your cortisol, and also a way to just, relax and feel really luxurious. I know it's just a silly example, but in my case, drawing a bath and, sitting there loving the smell of lavender. And for me, that was actually an essential part of my self-care during this crazy process of writing my book. It was really stressful. There were times when I kind of underestimated, certain parts of the process, and I ended up having to kind of do a lot within a short period of time and really push myself. And so it was like a savior to me to be able to, crawl into the bath some nights with some magnesium and some essential oils and just to relax and chill out. So it was really neat, actually, in this podcast episode to hear about the different applications and implications of essential oils beyond just like they smell good and feel nice. So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode, because I know I really enjoyed it with Dr. Mariza. So I just wanted to thank you once again for tuning into the show and for being part of the Fertility Friday community, for leaving great reviews on iTunes. I really appreciate it. It helps women to find the podcast. And I appreciate all of you for spreading the word. I see you on social media, tagging your friends in certain episodes and posts and sharing about Fertility Friday and the important message of how important having a regular, healthy ovulatory menstrual cycle is. And of course, those of you who have been actively sharing about the fifth vital sign and just really sending that essential message of why it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles, why menstrual cycles are a sign of health. And so I appreciate all of you for being a part of the community. If you haven't yet grabbed your free copy of the first chapter of the fifth vital sign, you can head over to fertilityfriday.com/vital sign. And the fifth vital sign, of course, is available for purchase on Amazon in ebook and paperback format. So I just want to thank you once again, and I hope you have a great week or weekend whenever you're listening to this episode. And until next time, be well and happy charting.